Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone, and welcome. I hope you enjoyed a little moon shadow on this eclipse week, and you're welcome in advance for not subjecting you for another rendition of Total Eclipse of the Heart. I'm sure everybody is quite sick of that song at this point, but we wanted to stay at least relatively on theme with Eclipse Week. This is our second of two webinars focused on the future of writing in the AI era. Today's webinar is going to be on process over output, how AI refines the future of writing pedagogy. And we'll get into content in just a second here, but before doing so, just a few housekeeping items as we usually tend to do. All attendees are automatically muted. At the moment, thank you everybody for putting in where you're coming from today. It's great to see that in the chat. As soon as we're done with this particular slide, the chat will be turned off, but you can use the Q&A widget at any time to type in any questions. Panelists and moderators will be able to see them, and we will do our best to address as many as we can before the top of the hour. So I know this goes till 45. Alex and I will be available to stick on for a few minutes after the 45-minute mark to take as many questions as possible. If you want to enable closed captioning, just click the CC button at the bottom of your webinar window. And as always, we will follow up with a recording of this webinar after the event. So just to give you a sense of how we're going to spend the next 35 to 40 minutes and then get to Q&A, we're going to do some quick intros. We will examine the current state of writing in the nascent AI era by looking at some third-party research and comments from subject matter experts. Then we'll get a little bit abstract, but hopefully helpfully so, by looking at writing as a process to preserve, and then get a little future state oriented with Alex taking us through a preview of a Grammarly product release that really hits at the collaboration between humans and AI. And then, like I said, we will save time for some questions. So as to who I am, my name is Cliff Archey, and I am a lead product marketing manager for education institutions and students here at Grammarly. Essentially, all that means is that it's my job to listen to and understand the education market, and then take insights back to our product team so that we build and continue to iterating on a product that really meets the needs of students and educators alike. But I am far less interesting and certainly not nearly as tall as our other speaker today, Alex Shevchenko. He is one of Grammarly's co-founders, and he remains a very influential and crucial voice here at Grammarly as a product leader. While Grammarly has grown to be much more than just an academic writing assistant over the past 15 years, Alex remains very passionate about EdTech and in serving our students and institutional customers. So today's topic on the future of writing was an ideal opportunity to bring him in. So Alex, welcome, and please introduce yourself to our audience.
Thanks, Cliff, and hi, everyone. So as Cliff mentioned, I co-founded Grammarly almost 15 years to the date with a friend of mine who's still my current colleague, Max Litvin. Today, I'm the head of core product, which essentially means I get to work on the fun future development for the core Grammarly assistant that underpins most of the end user engagement that you may know Grammarly for today. To do that job well, I need to understand how our assistive capabilities can best augment human abilities. So this topic is very relevant to what I do every day. It's also relevant because of our origin story. Grammarly was founded originally to be a writing assistant primarily for ESL students. My co-founder and I are not native English speakers. So having a tool that could help us communicate more accurately was key to us, and we saw very fast adoption and relevance in education early on. We've come a long way since then, and I'll talk about that in a bit, but I'm still very passionate about education, about EdTech, and I love hearing from our education customers. So I'm very happy to be here today and talk about the future of writing.
Great. Thanks, Alex. And please do bear with me as the audience is going to be subjected to my voice for a while here, but I'm going to bring you in momentarily. So stick with me. As we get into the content, we wanted to start with just a question that we at Grammarly have been grappling with ourselves over the past several months, and I'm sure a number of audience members have as well. And this is the question of, does Gen AI present an existential threat to the value of writing. Now, it probably comes as no surprise that we're asking this because the reality is that within a few days and weeks of ChatGPT being made public in November of 2022, higher education students were prompting it to create passable 5-paragraph essays that were proxies for actual knowledge demonstration. And this, rightfully so, sent educators and higher ed institutions into a bit of a spiral, asking questions like, what are the implications for writing when getting good enough text on the page is easier than it's ever been before? Now, Grammarly's position, as we will talk about in more depth later on, is a resounding no to this particular question, a perspective that I'm confident we probably share with a lot of you, but we didn't just arrive at that conclusion via some form of wish casting. We talked to many of our customers, we talked to subject matter experts, we got views of technologists, of the market in general. And what's clear is that there's a lot of nuance behind this particular question, and nuance that we hope to clarify for all of you today. Just want to briefly pause and look back at our first webinar on the future of writing at the end of February, because that was more of a thought leadership, higher level conversation around where the future of writing is headed and implications of AI on writing in general. And we asked a very open-ended question of our audience around how you are feeling about the future of writing. The good thing is that roughly 61% of our 1,000 attendees at the time felt quite optimistic about the future of writing. On the flip side, you can take that data point to say, a significant portion of higher ed and K-12 stakeholders are either neutral, they don't know how to feel about the future of writing, or they're pessimistic about it. And so our hope today is that by taking you through this framework, by having Alex showcase an example of what collaborating with AI in the writing process could look like in the future, will help you leave more optimistic than you did when you came in, and give you some considerations to take back to your institutions that can translate that optimism into action. So in terms of what informed the insights that we will share today, we got to this point via a number of different data points and interactions. So I mentioned before that we talked to a number of subject matter experts. These are subject matter experts who had some familiarity with Grammarly, but not in every case. And what they all shared is that they've all taught in higher education. They all research writing and AI's impact on writing, and they all have a very strong point of view about what the future of writing holds. So we'll share some of those insights momentarily. But we also looked at third-party and owned data and research, as well as historical precedents. So what are some examples of technological disruption that transformed the writing process in the past? What can we learn from that? And then finally, what do our customers think in this present moment? What are they struggling with? What are their opinions? We talked to a number of our nearly 3,000 education customers for Grammarly for Education to really glean more insights informing what you're going to see today. And so just to start out with the data and research piece of this, we'll look at some industry trends both in higher education and in the workplace, and we'll start with higher education. So back in November, we ran a 2,000-person survey for just students. Half of the students in that survey were Grammarly users and half were not. And we just wanted to gauge their level of comfort in working with generative AI tools. And you can see here, nearly 3/4 of students in that survey said that they felt at least somewhat comfortable working with and using generative AI. That's a little bit of a higher number than you may have seen in other studies, but I think it is certainly reflective of the level of comfort that they have in using generative AI on a regular basis. And we not only see this in higher education, we also see it in high school and in students who just are beginning their journey in higher education. With 64% of the class of 2027, that's the current freshman class, saying that AI has at least somewhat impacted their academic plans. That's from an Inside Higher Ed and Student Voice survey from January. And another data point that is worth mentioning, even though it's not on the slide from that survey, is that 81% of that same class of 2027 said that they want their institutions to teach them how to ethically and effectively use AI in preparation for the working world. So that shows really good recognition from younger students about how AI is transforming not only writing, but transforming their future outlook on their careers and the workplace itself. And that is good recognition because there's undeniable data to say that the workplace is transforming as we speak. But it's not transforming in all the ways you may expect. Communication skills are still incredibly high demand from virtually every employer that you survey. A June 2023 GMAC employer survey said that communication skills were the most important skills for graduates to possess. 70% of those surveyed agreed with that statement. And it just shows that communication and the ability to communicate across context is as important today in the generative AI era as it has been in the past. And if we consider why that's the case, we'll look at additional data from the workplace. And all 3 data points are from a Grammarly-sponsored Harris poll survey called the State of Business Communication from this past February. What's really interesting here is that this is a survey of knowledge workers. So you can assume the vast majority of those surveyed have college degrees. And knowledge workers are spending 88% of the work week just communicating. That may not be wholly surprising because if you think about knowledge work in general in 2024, a lot of people are in hybrid work environments where they may be spending a lot of time on Zoom, as we are today. They may be in in-person meetings. So all of that is communication, and that's fair enough. But perhaps the stat that was most striking to me personally is that knowledge workers are spending almost half their entire work weeks just on writing tasks, 19 hours per week devoted to writing tasks. And that is a considerable amount of time writing Slack messages to fellow colleagues, creating emails, writing project briefs if you're in marketing or on product. You can go down a litany of different tasks, but the takeaway here is that knowledge workers across sectors are writing a lot in the workplace today. And it probably comes as no surprise then that AI-driven tools are really an avenue for business leaders to invest and to boost employee productivity, with 82% of business leaders saying they plan to invest in AI-driven tools by 2025. So significant majorities investing in AI specifically for productivity in the very near future if they have not done so already. And what is particularly interesting if we look at year-over-year insights from the Harris poll. Grammarly does sponsor this and has for the last 3 years. Every year we see the volume of communication in the workplace increasing and the quality of that communication decreasing. What that means is that all these tools that employees and companies are adding to their tech stacks are just creating more opportunity for noise and for communication to be sent in all kinds of different places. But that doesn't mean that the communication itself is resonating with the intended audience, is impactful, and is helping scale productivity and efficiency across the workplace. So there's a real opportunity for AI tools and generative AI to streamline that and create efficiencies, but that efficiency is only going to be gained if the end users, aka future graduates, understand how to work with these tools effectively and understand what a good, effective writing output actually looks like. And so that brings us to conversations that we had with subject matter experts. Now, this is not exhaustive, and we do have a Future of Writing ebook that launched a couple weeks ago that my colleagues will share in the chat for you all to check out if you haven't already, that have more insights from subject matter experts. But a couple quotes that I think are representative of the dynamics that we are facing, particularly in higher ed. The first comes from Stephen Monroe, who's the chair of Writing and Rhetoric Department at the University of Mississippi and was a guest speaker on our February webinar. He says, brilliant people didn't become brilliant by letting generative AI write for them. The technology is astonishing and very useful, but writing is still the ultimate learning tool. And I think a way of just extending that is, particularly in the workplace, everybody who's using these tools effectively now have a basic understanding of what good writing looks like, and they have the evaluation skills to be able to make the most of them because they actually learned how to write. And they learned the value of writing to creative thinking, to critical thinking when they were in high school and hopefully in undergrad, and that allows them to use these tools more effectively. You can't replace that just by jumping straight to using generative AI tools to replicate that process. And I think the opinion of John Warner is particularly striking here. He is a former college instructor. He's a columnist, regular columnist in Inside Higher Ed, and he's been known to be skeptical of the value of generative AI in the writing process. And he says, if ChatGPT can do it, and if the purpose is learning, it's not worth doing. I think just another way of saying this is we very frequently in higher education for a long time use writing as a way of demonstrating baseline knowledge and baseline understanding of content. Obviously, generative AI tools do that quite well in the modern era. And so we need to redefine what writing is used for and the value that writing has to a more comprehensive and impactful learning process. And I think to that end, Sid Dobrin summarizes it quite well when he says, we need to teach students how to use AI as a collaborator in such a way that they can accomplish more than they could have without using it, and at the same time maintain authority over these tools. So really just thinking about using generative AI tools to augment the writing process, to augment human expertise. I know that that is something that is cited in a lot of different places, but I think it's particularly relevant when it comes to how writing works with AI to augment the ideas that the person wants to put on the page. And so this is a good synopsis of some of the conversations we had with subject matter experts. But now I want to turn to historical precedent. And I should say that we looked at a much longer time horizon of technological disruption to writing, going back all the way to the printing press. But for the sake of today's conversation, we chose to look at Grammarly's evolution as a more recent example. And this is not certainly an apples to apples comparison to what is happening right now with generative AI, but Grammarly's journey is instructive when it comes to the notion that writing as a practice often evolves alongside technology. And so, Alex, bringing you back into the fold here, I'd love to get your perspective as a technologist and a co-founder on what we can learn about the nature of technology adoption and evolution, and specifically zooming in on how the education community responded to Grammarly when you launched it 15 years ago.
Sure. So Grammarly was originally launched as a grammar and spelling assistant primarily for students. And given that my co-founder and I are Ukrainian, as an assistant to help English language learners like ourselves write more accurately in English. We were focused on the end user, the writers. However, what we did not expect was the eager adoption of Grammarly by educators. Teachers started recommending Grammarly to students and incorporating our product into their curriculum pretty early on in our evolution, even before we launched our freemium model back in 2015. So while we were helping our original target user students, we pivoted to start building on our tool to help meet more of the needs of teachers and professors. So this represents an important phenomenon in technology adoption, especially for this audience who will play a pivotal role in shaping the future of writing. So product developers produce technology with an idea for how it can be used. Is the users, students, and educators in this case will ultimately determine how it will be used, or if it will even be used. We call this product market fit. That is why these somewhat abstract conversations are really important. We as technology users play a significant role in how technology is adopted.
Yeah, I think that feedback from end users is super important. And speaking of that, early on, Grammarly's grammar error detection, I'm sure, caused some instructors, even though they were generally supportive to your point, to have reservations about that particular technology limiting skill development from students or replacing the role of human instructors to help teach effective spelling and grammar. Now, over time, certainly in conversations that I've been a part of with customers, that those reservations have become muted because there's a broader recognition that using AI to help with spelling and grammar allows students to focus on the more important aspects of writing. So my question to you is just what lessons do you think the Grammarly adoption trends to that end hold for generative AI, particularly in education?
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, adoption of Grammarly was quick, but not near the pace of or level of adoption of generative AI. I'll talk more about that in a second. So the main point of showing this timeline is not to bore you with all the product features we've launched in the past 15 years, but rather illustrate how technology evolved alongside writing, and how writers and educators' appetite to use technology in new ways continued to evolve as we were building our products. So the bar at the center represents this evolution. Grammarly was one of the first writing assistants in the market, and for the first decades, writers really looked on really only looked to technology support to help with accuracy of writing. However, around 2019, we started to recognize a larger pain point, primarily among business professionals who were looking for support to write more effectively and confidently. As writing became a bigger part of the digitally connected workplace, professionals needed to get better at blending the words they chose for their intended audience. This led to new technology like tone detection and clarity analysis. Similarly to accuracy in 2009, the education community was very eager to incorporate quality assistant features into their writing curriculum. I believe the education community was very open to these features because they clearly augmented writing rather than automated it. We also fully understood what the technology did and how it fit neatly into the writing process.
So just last question before we take some of your comments and try to make sense of it for the current moment we're living in. 2022, 23, we introduced generative AI. It came on the heels of ChatGPT's launch. What feels different this time around, and what feels similar to you?
Oh, sure. First of all, deploying new generative AI capabilities aligns where Grammarly, as a technology company, and our users have been evolving towards. So the next stage of quality assistance is helping communicators write in a way that resonates deeply with their audience. Generative AI has tremendous potential to help writers consider the full context of their communication to make sure it transfers information and meaning as effectively as possible to others. It does feel, in a way, it does feel different though, as a sheer pace of adoption and magnitudes of disruption. So for example, all the changes I just discussed happened over the course of 15 years. There's a lot of innovation, but it was a 15 years time span. Generative AI has potentially gone through more change in the last 15 months. So what is particularly different in the nature of generative AI? It's a proactive technology as opposed to a more passive technology that has traditionally been used for writing assistance.
Yeah, and I think that's a good segue, Alex, into just our view from leveraging a proactive technology like this and how it can balance out between learning priorities, particularly in higher education. Our view is that written communication will be a human-led collaboration with AI. But for that collaboration to actually level up writing and communication on the whole, everyone will need to possess a strong understanding of writing and of context. Because the reality is, as we talked a bit before, when it came to some of our workplace statistics and research, students and eventual graduates into the workforce can't make the most of AI if they don't emerge from their formal education with skills like understanding your own individual voice, critical thinking, point of view, writing for specific audiences, and certainly the ability to evaluate effective communication that is needed to be impactful communicators across a wide variety of different use cases. And so with the prevalence of AI assistance in virtually every writing surface that you encounter online, it's important to think about the writer not as solely a writer anymore, but as content owners. Content owners who may depend on AI to compose low-stakes texts in one context, things like just writing a quick email response, etc., and act as solely a reviewer or final check in another, where they actually compose all the text and then just turn to AI as a last mile support. In any scenario, however, content owners are responsible for what ultimately gets submitted. And so possessing a keen understanding of what good writing and communication looks like across a wide variety of contexts matters now more than it ever has. And so let's continue down this path and develop a bit of a loose framework here. We get understandably very fixated on output, not only in higher education, but in the workforce. And the reality is that good and effective communication involves a lot more than just the output. But output is ultimately the thing that gets evaluated, and it's the thing that's consumed. It's also the phase that is most disrupted by generative AI to date, because a student can easily turn to a generative AI tool to generate output and feign content mastery, even if they don't necessarily possess that knowledge independent of an AI output. And so let's consider what's lost if students on the whole take that sort of path headed in the future. It means that you lose a lot of the value that happens before you get to output. The ability to identify your audience, define what goals you have, investigate and research existing body of knowledge, and explore new perspectives. There's a lot of difficult but highly valuable work that is happening in the writing process phase before any text is actually typed or entered into the page. And we also, jumping directly to output, lose the value of composition, the power and the transferable skills that happen when you organize your thoughts on a page, when you try to construct your own arguments based on your goals, when you craft narratives that are aligned to what your audience needs to hear. And sure, generative AI can do at least some of these things decently well, but particularly for younger people who don't have deep experience recognizing and defining what compelling outputs look like, foregoing composition altogether weakens the muscles that are necessary to evaluate what a good and impactful output actually look like, and what the next step is, which is how to reflect on the quality of writing that has been generated before you actually get to the point of submission, evaluating accuracy, pressure testing the quality of that writing against your goals, and assessing the effectiveness for your target audience. So fundamentally, if students forego the writing process, composition, and critical reflection phases, they lose out on the core learning opportunities that John Warner and others were referencing on previous slides, and they fail to develop the type of recognition and evaluative skills that are needed to work effectively with generative AI systems in the immediate and long term. And skipping to output really forgoes something that we heard again and again in our conversations, not only with customers, but also with those subject matter experts, and that is the notion of the struggle. The idea that learning and practicing a strong writing process allows students to develop important skills like critical thinking, clarity of thought, the art of investigation, and so much more. And that there's inherent challenge and struggle in doing that work. But bypassing those critical stages, students lose the opportunity to hone their writing ability and carve out their own competitive advantage as communicators. And so that really leads us into where is the upside here and what should the future of writing, at least in our opinion, look like? Well, as mentioned before, we view this as a collaboration, but it's one that every writer, regardless of whether you're a student, a faculty member, a professional, needs to calibrate based on context and based on the intention behind the particular communication that is being written. So in this case, we see a chart that just has a continuum where you might be wholly dependent on yourself to write and send something in certain cases. And in other contexts, you may let AI do a lot of the legwork in composing because it's lower stakes. In most scenarios, we feel that there's going to be a mix and a blended approach here, and that the calibration will be very different for every communication because of how contextual communication is. So highly academic writing will hopefully continue to be heavily human-led, with AI acting as a reviewer. Feedback partner, source of ideation support, some of the things that we will get to before the end of this webinar. Repetitive communication tasks like replying to a rote email, submitting a project review, those may lean more heavily towards the right-hand side of the screen in the automated aspect, with a quick check from the content owner before they actually complete it and send it. But what's abundantly clear, again, is that students in K-12 and higher ed need guidance and training from instructors to develop a clear sense of when using generative AI is useful and effective, and when it's important to rely on human composition and process. And so just to round this out with the framework all in one particular continuum slide, the calibration is really pivotal moving forward. AI can be helpful not only in generating output, but in working with the human content owner throughout the various writing stages, helping them understand who their target audience is, how to define goals that are going to resonate with that audience, how to construct narratives that will really drive the point across, and during the critical reflection phase, how to assess the effectiveness of the writing aligned to those original goals. And so we envision an AI writing partner that can help all writers spend more of their human effort tailoring compelling messages to specific audiences in the moment, wherever they are writing. That is one of the advantages of Grammarly, is that it's ubiquitous and it works in every writing surface. We believe AI can actually enhance the process, composition, and reflection phases while empowering humans to create their best possible output for every context. And this leads us into the last phase of the webinar, where we're going to show a bit of a future state with a feature we just actually launched to business customers called Strategic Suggestions. It's been trained on a rich corpus of business writing and will expand to other domains like academic writing in the very near future. So, Alex, I'm going to turn it over to you to talk more about Strategic Suggestions as it stands today, how it relates to this sort of continuum and support in the process, composition, and critical reflection phases, and where we could possibly take this when it comes to academic writing in the future.
Awesome. Let's talk product. So as Cliff mentioned, we actually just launched sort of a next generation of Grammarly's assistants via a feature we call Strategic Suggestions. It's very in line with what Cliff has been outlining in terms of a real-time writing collaboration between a human and AI. And we are rolling it out first to our business users and customers to address a very real pain point that has been increasing since generative AI began being adopted by organizations in large numbers. So that is reducing the flood of ineffective communication for the sake of better communication. Strategic Suggestions work with the human writer in the background, understanding based on what you've written, who your target audience is, and what the end goal of your communication is. So we'll look at all these factors and then proactively nudge the user before they arrive at a finished output to consider improving their communication based on gaps that Grammarly has identified. So based on the framework that Cliff covered, you can imagine a world today for professionals where Grammarly is helping to level up the process, composition, and reflection phases of writing while still giving them the user's ultimate control. This is only available today on business writing, but we wanted to share a bit more about this because it could certainly be trained on academic writing to extend this future of writing framework to students and faculty members. So flipping the slides, I wanted to talk a little bit about the collaboration with Grammarly's writing assistant. So just to quickly, demonstrate how this feature supports the collaborative writing process today for business writing, let's look at a few examples of very common writing in the workplace. So the type of communication that students today will be expected to do as soon as they enter the workplace. You can imagine use cases like writing an email, posting a Teams or Slack message, creating a project brief, you name it. So in this example, you can see that the professional salesperson is trying to set up a demo with a customer. They draft the email, and they're doing so. As they're doing so, Grammarly picks up that they're writing to a customer and that the goal is to get them to set up a time for a demo. So in that way, Grammarly is in the background activating the process phase that we previously covered. There's just one problem with the email. The salesperson has not given the customer a reason to want to accept the invite. Grammarly gently nudges the salesperson with a suggestion that says, describe the benefits of the demo call so your client knows to prioritize it. Again, the writer did not have to specify any of this. Grammarly perceived it, inferred it based on the understanding of this type of customer-facing outreach, and was able to proactively nudge the writer to up-level their communication and prevent unnecessary back and forth. So flipping to the next slide. So here is an example of a strategic suggestions helping in the composition phase, and specifically around constructing core messages that resonate. So in this specific case, a professional is making a recommendation to their management. They want to get their buy-in on the proposal to partner with a third party, but Grammarly recognizes that they haven't specified the cost. Again, it nudges the user, the writer, helping them construct a better argument and deliver a more impactful core message. So flipping to collaborating with Grammarly's writing assistant. So the critical reflection part. This is slide 21, Cliff.
Yep.
And so when it comes to critical reflection, here is an example of a more senior leader writing a message to their team. The message is a difficult one, so they're scrapping a project that the team spent a lot of time on. In this case, Grammarly helps the leader rephrase their writing to be more empathetic, and given the likely frustrations their team has over the decision. Again, the leader was ultimately in the driver's seat here, but Grammarly was sitting in the background and stepping in when seeing an opportunity to up-level the quality and effectiveness of the difficult message they were trying to deliver. So the leader could have dismissed the suggestion, but at least had the benefit of Grammarly's AI serving as a reflection partner and final substantive check on how their communication would resonate with their audience. And kind of moving on, we're really excited to talk about a different application of the technology we're building that could definitely be used for academic writing. So what I'm about to show you is still in development and will continue to be fine-tuned with input from our education customers. But even in this prototype stage, and please don't mind the user interface here, it is a prototype. So even at this stage, it provides a good example how contextually aware technology can assist in the human and eye collaborative writing process. So on the screen is an experimental UI populated with an example history writing assignment on the influences of the American Revolution. Again, as I mentioned, the look and feel will evolve to fit into how and where writers actually write. So it's not, it's kind of writing surface agnostic. So Grammarly's general approach is to work where our users, work and writes. But this interface is just to give you an idea of what's kind of possible from the kind of workflow standpoint. So you can imagine that this UI will evolve to fit into how and where the different topics that students write about. but also the goal here is to illustrate how students can collaborate with generative AI for academic writing. So on the left, you have an essay on the influence of the Enlightenment era on the American Revolution. Just one example, but this could be really done with any student writing. In this demo environment we've set up, you can hit evaluate, and in the background, Grammarly will infer the outcome or goal of the writing, as well as the target audience without the end user having to specify it. And while Grammarly today hasn't been trained to understand the nuances of student writing for class course, you can see it does a decent job of recognizing this essay's goal is to explain, and it's being written for a scholarly audience. So yeah, if you could click, thank you. So next, Grammarly analyzes the strengths and areas of improvement for the writing as a whole. So Grammarly identifies the good stuff, and so you can see the items that the product has identified here as kind of positives, and it even singles out specific strengths and explains the reasons behind the strengths of the output. So kind of moving on, then Grammarly tries to help the writer identify areas to improve. So in this particular case, Grammarly recognizes that the thesis is a bit vague and it doesn't really have a strong point of view. It's clear that the ideas of John Locke and Rousseau played a significant role. That does not really say anything interesting, and Grammarly's guidance here is pushing the writer to level up their point of view in the thesis statement to strengthen the level of engagement through the rest of the essay. Gonna switch into the next slide. Another example where you could see this helping students in particular is around substantive citation support. You can see the suggestion gets at the why behind a frequently annoying task for students, and that is properly and clearly citing sources. In this case, Grammarly gets the impact of excluding in-text citation detail. This could raise questions about credibility of information, make it harder for readers to locate the original sources. You'll notice that all of the feedback shown thus far supports either the process or critical reflection phases of writing that we talked about earlier. None of the insights or suggestions are actually helping with composition or to improve the output. The ideal state is having each institution train the tool on their specific guidelines, providing a tailored educational experience. So Grammarly would give an education institution total control of what the kind of criteria and parameters and variables of this output would be, what students would see. So I could certainly foresee a world in which the insights are turned on by default for all users. However, it could be up to the institution and potentially even up to the specific professor or faculty member to enable composition features that enable the end user to act upon the suggestions. So flipping to the next slide. And certainly we believe that making those insights immediately actionable for students could be a value add to this human AI collaboration. But it should be in the right context. You could you can see here that there is a suggested prompt in this interaction that pushes the author to highlight what makes their argument unique. So here, Grammarly actually provides a suggestion in this specific case. There's also a suggestion from Grammarly to enrich the conclusion with compelling insights. this is moving the writing forward and helping to enhance the output. But as we mentioned, ultimately, the student writer, as the content owner of, in this case, will need to determine if Grammarly's compositional support fits their goals and style. And faculty members will have to align these types of suggestions with the goal of the assignment. So I'll pass it back to Cliff to close us out. But as I do, I just want to reiterate that this is still in the development stage. So as educational leaders, I mean, you as educational leaders play a big role at this moment in time to help inform what the future of writing will look like and where technology needs to evolve to best support it. I hope to hear more from our educational stakeholders as we continue building this. So thanks for letting me preview it a bit today.
Thanks so much, Alex. And again, I hope that was instructive as a way of sort of bringing the framework to life through a product perspective. You can see that there's a pull up on your screen right now. Jumping ahead to the last point, Grammarly is actively thinking about how to empower content owners, as we covered today, to stay in creative control while proactively leveling up their thinking. And so if you want to talk to a salesperson about how Grammarly can help your institution responsibly embrace the future of writing, please respond in the poll that's now open on your screen. And as we get to Q&A, I just want to repeat some of the key takeaways here. So if we look at historical precedent, we know there have been numerous disruptions to how writing was previously done over time. And Grammarly's case is particularly instructive, even if it is imperfect, because it shows that finding product market fit, getting the support of instructors really takes time, but it also helps inform developing a product and developing a piece of technology, in the case of generative AI, that is actually going to meet market needs and that of learning outcomes. And writing will remain a prerequisite for practical AI skill. So that, to me, is the biggest reason for optimism in this entire discussion, because without a strong sense of what good writing entails, it will be very difficult to make good use of generative AI tools in the real world. And the last piece here is that we are really thinking about how to shift the traditional role of a writer to being more of a content owner, allowing them to evaluate and improve upon generative AI output while understanding the tasks and context for when to lean heavily on AI versus sparingly. And so again, if you want to talk to Grammarly about this, please respond to the poll, and we will take a few questions before we get to the full top of the hour. Got a number of questions here. Just taking. So one piece here that Mary asks is, I'm curious about ideas for using AI early in the writing process, especially for generating an outline or thinking about structure. That's a great question that we get often. You can think about generative AI as a tool for ideation and brainstorming support. Going back to, just if you bear with me on clicking, back to that process phase, generative AI can be extremely impactful and helpful in this regard. We have added brainstorming capabilities into our product with inline suggestions around if you're looking to construct an outline, you're looking to brainstorm topics for your assignment, you're thinking about how to research. Those are all student-centric preset prompts that we have in our assistant right now. And it's just an example of how a lot of different generative AI tools are helping spawn creativity and curiosity and inquiry at the beginning of the writing process, so that when you get to the point of writing text, it is much more informed and it's given much more thought to what the goals of your writing are, what you're trying to convey, and who your audience is. So those are just some examples, and you can obviously play with that in the Grammarly Assistant at any point in time. It's available with more prompts if you're on a Grammarly for Education license, but it's available in our free offering as well, so feel free to experiment. Just looking here, one question that we got asked a lot, both before and during this webinar, is around detection. And so Margaret asks, how equipped is Grammarly to check if AI has generated writing? I am not the best person to answer that. Alex is a very good person to answer that. So Alex, do you have a thought around that?
Sure. Yeah, it's a great question. Definitely, it's a question that's on top of many people's minds now. And we're actually building something in this space, and we feel that Grammarly is uniquely positioned uh, to play a role and to be a factor in this kind of decision making process of whether a human or a robot wrote text, because Grammarly is embedded in the writing process. So it's not taking a state of a written text and runs an AI model to determine whether AI wrote this like it's done today with very kind of questionable results. So the track that's ongoing here within Grammarly, we are actively researching this and taking it to to a productization stage, is basically embedding, because Grammarly is an application that's running on our users' machines. We can factually establish provenance of text being written. So whenever we see that human has touched these keys on the keyboard and wrote this word that turned into a sentence, that turned into a paragraph, that turned into a text, we can sign it as written by that specific signed in to Grammarly user. So we call this digital provenance, and the more generative AI is used for more use cases, the more this problem of establishing provenance of human work will the more acute it will be. And the technology that we're building here, we feel very soon will be in the center of establishing this provenance. So stay tuned. There will be very interesting updates on this topic very soon.
Yeah, we will definitely be revisiting that in the fall. So to Alex's point, stay tuned on that front. This is a really interesting question from John. How will AI have an understanding of what is factually accurate and morally right and wrong? What's the source of this understanding? Alex, I want your take on that as a technologist. I think if you are following a lot of the model coverage from Google, from Claude, from OpenAI, from Microsoft, you'll notice that each of the large language models that are being developed have a bit of a different flavor. And to the second part of your question, what's the source of this understanding? The truth of the matter is that each of these models is being informed by their developers, and they have a certain perspective that those developers take in building the product. So there's a great podcast that I would recommend from the New York Times and the Ezra Klein Show, where he talks to Ethan Mollick from the University of Pennsylvania about this very point, and the fact that each of these models just has a bit of a biased lens from the perspective of the creator. I would say, it's a little bit hazardous to assign morality to any of these models, because they are just representations of their creators and of the large corpus that they've been trained on. But I'm not sure, Alex, if you have a particular perspective on this.
No, that's a good take on this. And the only thing I would add is there's always an opportunity to tune a model, the output of a model in post processing, to align it with the with the definition of factual correctness, or the definition of ethical, or what's moral, so that the output would be it's sort of tuned accordingly. It's called responsible AI, and responsible AI is as a track. It's kind of like it's part of the foundational model to what Cliff has described, but it's also a part of what's possible to add to the model in the post processing. So meaning what the output of the model is basically tuned accordingly. And so at Grammarly, we work very closely with the foundational model providers, including OpenAI and Google, and we work very closely with their responsible AI teams, but we have our own. And so, for example, like in like an OpenAI, if you ask the model, just write me an essay on this topic, it will write you an essay. In Grammarly, this is something that Grammarly will respond as like as a as an AI model. I cannot do it for you. Like, here are some ideas on how you can start writing an essay, but I will not write an essay for you, right? So this is not something that's coming from the foundational model. It's something that Grammarly is basically applying on top. So this tuning layer is a very just yet another opportunity for Grammarly to kind of collaborate with a client, education institution, and kind of build a better product together.
Yeah, that's a great point. I know we are almost at the top of the hour. There's one quick question that I can answer that I saw from Glenn, who asked, how will prompt engineering interface with students learning how to develop main ideas and thesis statements? We previously linked to the Future of Writing report that we published last month. There's a whole section in that Future of Writing report from University of New Mexico that talks about the clear framework for prompt engineering. So definitely check out the Future of Writing report for more insight into how prompt engineering can help develop with main ideas and thesis statements. I think there's a lot more just professional development and training for students and for faculty members around how to teach that with prompt engineering, but there's a lot of good work happening out of the University of New Mexico and a broader consortium of librarians around prompt engineering that's worth checking out. We really appreciate everybody's time. We know this is a meeting discussion and a lot of us talking at you, but we hope that you have some really good takeaways and considerations from the Future of Writing. I want to thank Alex for sharing the Grammarly product perspective on this, and we look forward to speaking with you again in the very near future. Have a great rest of the week, everybody.